I want you to start by, well, trying a quick thought experiment. Picture the three most valuable things you possess right now. Like, really picture them.
Oh, this is a fun one.
Right. Maybe it's your laptop, your car, your savings account, or perhaps even a highly specialized professional skill you spent the last decade developing. Got them firmly in your mind. Okay, now ask yourself, if the power grid, the internet, the global logistics chain, or the fundamental legal system just vanished tomorrow, how many of those things would retain any value at all?
Yeah, it forces a bit of a perspective shift, doesn't it? Because when you really break down the mechanics of value, I mean, the answer for almost all of us is that those assets would become essentially worthless overnight.
And that slightly terrifying realization is, well, it's the perfect starting point for our deep dive today. Welcome in, everyone.
Glad to be here.
Today's mission is to explore a really subtle, yet incredibly profound shift in how the world actually works. We're pulling from a fascinating central article titled, Why is the World Beginning to Compete Over Sustainable Connectivity Rather Than Ownership?
Yeah, and to help us navigate the observations in that article, the authors utilize a few structural models. You might see them referred to in the text as GOA, MCP, and LMOS.
Right, and I want to be clear here, we aren't going to turn this into some dry lecture on theoretical frameworks.
No, definitely not. We're simply using these models as, like, auxiliary lenses. Our real focus is the article's core hypothesis.
Which is basically, why does it feel like simply owning things isn't enough anymore? And why is the ability to maintain continuous connection becoming the true measure of power and, well, survival?
Exactly. And let's start with that shift, because the old paradigm of wealth was entirely about static possession. It was about what you could literally put a fence around.
Yeah, like you bought a house and the physical bricks were yours. I remember buying music on CDs. I mean, I owned that piece of plastic. If the power went out or if the record label went bankrupt, I still physically possessed the CD.
Right. But now, almost everything of significant value sits on the other side of a complex network. We're swimming in an era of software as a service, cloud storage, and AI processing that happens in server farms thousands of miles away.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. And what the researchers found is that society isn't actually abandoning the desire to own things. Like, we still make purchases.
We still like our stuff.
We do. But what has fundamentally changed are the prerequisites for that ownership to actually function. We've moved from holding an asset to essentially holding a state of maintained connection.
So it's sort of like going out and buying a top-of-the-line, beautiful, incredibly expensive car.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You own the metal, right? The glass, the leather seats.
Yeah.
But then you realize you don't own the roads you have to drive on. The manufacturer requires a monthly satellite subscription just to unlock the engine's full horsepower.
And a third-party server has to authenticate your digital key every single time you pull the door handle.
Exactly. You might legally own the physical vehicle, but you are entirely at the mercy of the invisible connections required to make it operate.
The car analogy gets us halfway there, but I think the article takes it a step further. Because unlike a car, where you at least intuitively understand that you need physical roads,
Right.
in our modern economy, the enabling infrastructures are often completely invisible to the user. When these researchers talk about connectivity, they aren't just talking about having a strong Wi-Fi signal.
So what else is included in that?
They're talking about the underlying electricity grids, the maritime logistics, supply chains, and the digital authentication systems. They even include legal contracts, institutional stability, and, honestly, basic social trust.
Wow, social trust. So you could build the most technologically advanced automated factory on the planet. You hold the deed to the land and the patents to the machines. But if the maritime shipping lane bringing you raw materials is blocked, or, like you said, if the local population loses trust in your institution and refuses to work with you, that factory is just a very expensive silent monument.
Which means the value of an asset no longer exists in isolation. It only materializes and stays materialized when multiple overlapping layers of connection are sustained over time.
Okay.
And that introduces a massive structural vulnerability. Because if the value of your highly advanced digital asset relies entirely on its connection to these broader physical and social systems...
What happens when those systems operate on completely different timelines?
Yes, that is exactly the issue.
That is exactly what I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Because my software updates in, what, a matter of seconds?
Yeah.
But building a new electrical substation to power the data center running that software, that takes half a decade.
Right. And the structural frameworks actually have a specific term for this friction. They call it the velocity mismatch, or the
Oh,
speed gap.
velocity mismatch. Okay.
Yeah, think about the digital services, the AI models, and the global financial markets. These operate on what the models refer to as a high-speed operating system.
Hmm.
They can pivot, update, and scale in days, hours, or even milliseconds, but they are entirely dependent on physical and social infrastructures: the shipping ports, the power grids, the legal frameworks, and human cultural adaptation.
And those are the low-speed hardware.
Exactly. Those are essentially low-speed hardware. They evolve over years or generations.
So we are basically trying to run a lightning-fast, futuristic operating system on hardware that was built, in some cases, 50 years ago.
Pretty much.
My question is, how does society not just break down completely by noon every day? I mean, if there's that much friction between the speed of our digital ambitions and the reality of our physical limits, we should be seeing sparks flying everywhere.
Well, often there are sparks, but we're conditioned to ignore them through a phenomenon the article calls silence detection.
Silence detection. Wait, what does that mean?
It's a bit like the hum of your kitchen refrigerator.
Yeah.
You completely tune it out because it's constant. It operates reliably in the background, so your brain categorizes it as quiet.
Oh, I see. You only ever notice it the exact second the power cuts out and the silence stops.
Bingo. The article points out that the most critical layers of human civilization are these quiet layers. We obsess over the loud layers, the performance of a new app, the daily stock market fluctuations, viral trends.
But the authentication protocols, the underground fiber optic cables, the mundane transit of cargo ships,
We completely forget our total dependence on them because they don't demand our attention.
until the refrigerator stops humming.
Hmm.
Like when a single cargo ship gets stuck in a canal or a specific software update grounds thousands of flights globally, suddenly that background silence turns into a blaring siren.
And that is the danger of the velocity mismatch. A highly advanced, hyper-fast digital system is completely paralyzed if a slow, quiet physical layer fails.
Right.
The friction between these worlds creates massive structural vulnerabilities that remain hidden during normal times. They only become visible during a crisis, when a single disruption ripples upward, instantly knocking out the fast-moving layers that rely on them.
If these systems are that vulnerable to friction, it really makes me think that our modern obsession with perfectly optimized efficiency is actually a trap.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Because we've spent the last few decades building these incredibly tight supply chains.
Yeah.
We use just-in-time manufacturing so we don't have to pay for warehouse space. We use algorithms to optimize every single second of a delivery driver's route.
But we're optimizing the loud layers while ignoring the quiet ones.
Exactly.
And the MCP model, which focuses on how systems process capacity and metabolism, addresses this directly through something called the fluid axioms. There is a documented mathematical danger in complete synchronization.
Wait, a danger? How so?
When you engineer a perfectly synchronized, highly efficient system, you are essentially stripping away all of its adaptability.
Because efficiency, by definition, means eliminating waste. But in a complex system, waste is just another word for a shock absorber.
That is a brilliant way to put it. Let's look at just-in-time manufacturing again.
Okay.
If an auto plant decides it's inefficient to keep a month's worth of microchips in a local warehouse, they save money on storage. The system is leaner. But now they have zero fluctuation or play in their system. If a single shipping container is delayed by a storm halfway across the globe, the disruption doesn't stay localized.
Because there are no buffer inventories, so that single delay instantly halts the entire global production line.
Exactly.
Which means a perfectly efficient system is actually incredibly brittle. If one link snaps, the whole chain shatters.
And the frameworks take this observation into some genuinely sobering territory. They map out a specific state that happens to these highly efficient, rigid systems, labeled in the MCP model as phase S3.5, or chronic depolarization.
Chronic depolarization. Okay, let's break down the mechanics of that. Because usually when we talk about systems failing, we imagine an explosive collapse. The bridge falls down. The company goes bankrupt.
Right, but chronic depolarization is much more insidious than a sudden collapse. It describes a state where a system manages to hold itself together, but it completely loses its ability to rest, recover, and dissipate heat.
So it's like a car engine running at the red line 24 hours a day. It hasn't blown a gasket yet, but the metal is warping.
Yes. The system becomes constantly irritated. It operates in a high friction state where the threshold for a reaction drops so low that even tiny stimuli trigger massive system-wide overreactions.
Wow. It sounds exactly like what happens to algorithms on social media.
How so?
Well, the platforms are perfectly efficient at delivering content to keep you engaged. There's no friction, no natural stopping point, no buffer of boredom. As a result, the entire network exists in a state of chronic depolarization.
That's a really good observation.
Everyone is hypersensitive to every tiny piece of news, constantly outraged and chronically exhausted. It's a system running permanently hot.
The article actually uses that exact type of phenomenon as a prime example. Chronically overworked societies, exhausted organizations bouncing from one artificial fire drill to the next, hyper-connected markets that panic over minor data anomalies.
Right.
The researchers define this as a state of constant reaction. Recovery becomes structurally impossible, and fatigue becomes fixed into the architecture of the system itself.
This connects so directly to what people feel in their daily lives right now. We've essentially built our personal and professional lives to mimic these hyper-efficient supply chains.
Yeah, we have.
We are perfectly connected. We have Slack on our phones, emails pushing to our watches, constant notifications, but we've eliminated all the buffer time.
We have absolutely zero metabolic surplus, as the models would say.
Right. If a single meeting runs late or a kid gets sick, the entire week's schedule collapses because there was no Slack built into the system.
We've optimized for continuous connection at the direct expense of our capacity for recovery. And the structural hypothesis here is very clear. A system that cannot recover, even if it hasn't technically collapsed yet, is fundamentally unstable.
It's basically living on borrowed time.
Exactly.
So if perfectly rigid efficiency ultimately causes chronic exhaustion and fragility, then the goal can't just be staying connected at all costs. It isn't about plugging in as many cords as possible and running the machine at maximum speed.
No, it's not.
True stability has to be about the quality of that connection and, more importantly, the system's ability to repair itself when the connection snaps.
And this realization forces a radical redefinition of concepts we take for granted. For example, the source material argues we need to redefine the word health.
Health, like physical health.
Well, in these frameworks, health is not the absence of friction. It's not a magical state of zero problems or perfect efficiency. Health is defined mechanically as the possibility of repolarization.
Meaning the system has the capacity to reset itself. Like it can take a hit, absorb the shock, and return to a stable baseline.
Correct. And to achieve that health, the text redefines another word, care. It explicitly states that in a structural sense, care is not an emotion.
Hold on, I have to push back on that.
I figured you might.
Are the researchers seriously reducing human empathy and care to a mechanical shock absorber for a supply chain? Because that sounds incredibly cold and dystopian.
It does sound sterile at first glance, I'll give you that. But look at it practically. If a corporation releases a statement saying they care about employee burnout, but structurally, their business model requires 100% utilization of their employees' time with zero margins for error.
They don't actually care.
Right. Emotion without infrastructure is useless. The text defines care as a structural repolarization infrastructure. Care is the deliberate preservation of excess capacity.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So care is actually paying the financial cost of having a 20% inventory buffer in the warehouse, just in case. Care is a manager giving their team an afternoon off after a brutal sprint, even if it hurts that week's productivity metrics, so they don't burn out.
Yes.
Care is investing in the infrastructure that allows a system to heal, rather than just grinding its gears to dust while feeling really sympathetic about it.
Exactly that. The loss of that infrastructure, the disappearance of what the models call phase fluidity, or the ability to flex and adapt, is the most dangerous state for any system to be in.
This brings us beautifully back to the core thesis of the article. The defining question of the future isn't, can you access this network once?
Yeah.
Or how many static assets can you legally own?
No, the real survival level questions are very different.
They are. It's about how long can you maintain the enabling conditions for your assets? And crucially, when the connection inevitably breaks because of the velocity mismatch between the fast digital world and the slow physical world, how quickly can you reconnect?
Because disruptions are an absolute mathematical certainty. The friction cannot be eliminated. Therefore, the entities that thrive, whether we are talking about an individual career, a multinational company, or an entire nation, won't be the ones hoarding the most static assets.
What will they be?
They will be the ones who possess what the frameworks call fluctuation stability.
Fluctuation stability. Let's make sure we unpack that mechanically before we wrap up.
Sure. Fluctuation stability is the opposite of rigid efficiency. It means deliberately engineering margins into your life or your business. It means having redundancy. It means allowing for local diversity, noise, and error rather than forcing perfect top-down synchronization. It is the capacity to flexibly reconnect with a changing world when your primary connection fails.
So, if a massive storm takes out the centralized power grid, the winner isn't the person who owns the biggest, most expensive, most highly optimized factory in the region. The winner is the person who invested in a local solar microgrid, or the person who spent years building strong, high-trust relationships with the local community to source alternative power.
Exactly. Or the company that has the operational flexibility to pivot their entire logistics chain on the fly.
It is a massive shift from seeking security through hoarding objects to seeking resilience through maintaining relationships. The real value is no longer in the object itself. The value lives in the dynamic pathways that keep the object relevant, powered, and operational.
Which is a huge structural shift.
I want to try and synthesize the journey we've just been on. We started by looking at a world that has historically measured wealth and safety by what we could put a fence around.
Right.
But what this article and the structural model supporting it reveals is that in a hyper-connected world, an isolated asset is basically dead weight. It's an engine with no fuel, sitting on a planet with no roads.
And we aren't abandoning ownership. You still need the engine. But we are waking up to our profound, inescapable dependence on the quiet, slow layers that keep ownership functional.
From the electricity flowing through the walls to the invisible legal contracts to the fundamental social trust that allows human beings to cooperate in the first place.
And as we navigate this transition, it's really important to remember the directive of these observation frameworks. We are not trying to force a definitive conclusion today.
Right. We aren't locking down a single fixed meaning or predicting exactly what the economy will look like in 10 years.
The goal is to maintain our own cognitive phase fluidity. This shift from static ownership to sustainable connectivity is an open, ongoing hypothesis. It's a transition that we are all actively living through right now, every single day, as the fast digital world continues to grind against the slow physical world.
It fundamentally changes how you assess risk, value, and stability in your own life. And, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Oh, let's hear it.
It's something that takes this concept of fluctuation stability and applies it to a completely different layer of our existence, human biology and aging.
Okay, interesting.
Think about how we approach our health. We often try to build perfectly efficient, comfortable lives. We seek climate-controlled rooms, perfectly sanitized environments, absolute stress reduction.
Yeah, we try to avoid all discomfort.
Right, we try to hoard our health by protecting it from all friction. But if true vitality is the ability to recover from a shock, to repolarize, as we were saying, then maybe the key to longevity isn't avoiding stress altogether.
So what is it?
Maybe it's about actively introducing small, controlled stresses into our systems, like cold plunges, fasting, or intense exercise. Maybe our bodies, just like global supply chains, require a little bit of friction to keep the repolarization engines running.
That's a really profound way to look at it. It scales all the way down.
So look around at the assets you value most. Are you investing all your energy into building a taller fence to protect them? Or are you investing in the networks, the buffers, and the resilience required to keep them connected to a chaotic world? Because tomorrow, the person with the most things might just lose to the person who knows how to plug back in. Thank you for exploring these structural depths with us today. Take care and keep questioning the quiet layers around you.